I am hoping that you will find everything you need in the presentation. All right. So today I've used green and black and blue throughout the presentation. And if you can't see these color spectrums, don't worry. A copy of the slides can be sent to you in black and white if you request it. All right. But all text references are actually going to be in blue. There will be markers after each session to ask questions, and my lovely colleague Tina Hunter and partner in crime, she'll be answering those throughout in the chat box. So if you could stay muted and put any questions that you might have in the chat box, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. Tina, can you see the chat box?
Yep, I can see the chat box. I'll be looking in there, and I'll try to type correctly. Otherwise, I'll hold the questions for you and we can open them afterwards.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I can't see the chat box, so bear with us. We're going to be working in tandem here on this. So as I say, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions verbally afterwards at the session. I'm acknowledging that out of the 5 sessions, 5 areas rather, that we'll be covering today, they could easily be a 2-hour session in themselves. All right. So I want to reiterate, if you want to know more about each area, by all means, do mention it to Bell House, because as was introduced at the beginning, they do offer the community a whole array of provisions, and some of those obviously training workshops, interactive talks. And if you are personally interested in anything specifically, we can arrange for those things for you. So do a liaise with Bell House, because they've got lots of exciting ventures planned and running currently. So the first port of call then is to just review what you probably already know. Specific learning difficulties. I'm going to use that phrase tonight. And what I mean by that is rather an umbrella term, all right? I'm referring to dyslexia, to dyspraxia, developmental coordination difficulties, dyscalculia, attention deficit disorders, which I do understand have other coexisting difficulties. But ultimately, the provisions in this presentation this evening will hopefully make sure you are prepared for looking at diagnosis and applying for grants. All right. I have put a slide in because individuals like myself, we forget that we use acronyms quite a lot throughout lives, and we forget. All right. So what I have done is I have put some reminders of what some of those acronyms are. All right. So hopefully this slide will help you with any acronyms that you might find during the presentation. So for those who have joined, welcome. If I could ask you to put yourself on mute, and we're just going through the aims and objectives of what this evening should be covering. I'm going to quickly cover mentally preparing the SPLD student and talk about how empowering is really important. But for how parents and educators can support neurodiverse students to develop autonomy actually starts with this area, the psychology, the character, the attitude of the student. So that's what we're going to briefly look at, but it is important to acknowledge and look at that going forward. We will then look at the types of assessments, because obviously you want to understand what you might have, what your son or daughter or teen or student or yourself has, and you want to understand that. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the types of assessments. And then we're going to focus on the study skills aspect. I want to reiterate again, this is not a study skills session. It is just to give you an idea of where to start and what to look for and what to go forward with. So we will, however, focus on this, and I'll give you some exemplars here. Then we'll look again at enhancing a young adult's self-development, their emotional intelligence. I've put a lot of information in that section, but we will not be dwelling too much on it. I've put lots of parent-student activities for you to go away and do with your child to enhance some of these areas. I've put lots of referencing materials so that you can go away and do that together, because when we get there, you'll see why. And finally, I'm going to also focus on grant funding and university transition. And that's why those two areas are covered in bold. And here is, if you don't like lots of words, a visual representation of what we're going to be doing. Collectively, 5 points, we're moving through them and all of them are equally as important, all right? So our first area, mentally preparing the, oops, sorry, I just bounced through that. Okay, so mentally preparing the SPLD student pre-diagnosis. You may have students or children who have diagnoses already. I acknowledge that, all right? But what is important here is that you understand that there is important reasons to acknowledge why this is important, because there are 3 areas of interest in the room, I suspect. Firstly, those who have teens or students who've got a diagnosis of SPLD, and you might be wondering, well, they may have coexisting conditions with SPLD. And secondly, you might have some attendees who have just had their teens diagnosed post-16. And thirdly, you may not have a diagnosis or a formal diagnosis. So there's lots of different rationales in the room and reasons of why you're attending tonight, but this is really important to look at. And so what I want to do is look at the tips. And can I just ask you to use the button on your chat box and let Tina know how many of you actually attended the GCSE session. I can't see the response, so Tina, if you could let me know how many.
There's nothing in the chat box yet. But I do reckon. Oh, okay. No, nothing here yet. Oh, at one time, not everyone knew about the GCSE session, so I think that's some of the feedback we've got there.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to give you a little exemplar. And if you did attend the GCSE, apologies, it's a repetition. So normally, before I start any diagnostic assessment, I always ask the student, are they left-handed or right-handed? Some students may say they're right-handed and some might say they're left. But invariably, I always say to them, if I made you use your non-dominant hand to write a letter, does that mean you can't write? And the student would turn around and say, no, I can write. It's just you've made me use my non-dominant hand. And I would then talk to them about how they would feel writing with their non-dominant hand, the issues that they would have, how it would feel if they were forced to do that. And that is, in effect, how dyslexic or SPLD learners feel in a classroom. They are being forced, if you like, to learn in a certain way that is not their natural way of learning. It doesn't mean that they don't know how to learn. They have different ways of learning, and that's what we want to celebrate. So we want to focus on abilities, strengths in learning, and I'm going to come on to that and how you use that. I'm going to look at how we as educators, as parents, and also as dyslexic learners possibly, how we use positive language and encourage adaptability and use genuine praise and rewards. Those are really important things that we'll be looking at later on. So, types of assessments. I'm going to give you some guidance on the different reports, etc. But I want to really start by looking at what assessors and qualifications, there are all of these different individuals around. What do they do? And who can diagnose, and why are they there, and why can one person do one thing and not another? There's all these sorts of questions that are bandied about. So these are the 3 key individuals that you need to know about at A-levels. You need to know the SENCO, and that they can only apply for A-level exam adjustments. They cannot diagnose SPLD. And then subsequently, you need to know about the psychologists and the specialist teachers. I'm not going to dwell on this slide because I think that is more of an informative slide for you. And what I've done in this slide is I've actually given you some facts, some things to think about if you are looking for a post-16 diagnostic assessment. All right, so these 2 slides are more informative for you to review. This slide here is to go through and acknowledge with you some of the questions that we assessors are typically asked. And I'm hoping that we've learnt, we speakers, Tina and I, have learnt from past experiences of what is asked of us at this level and at university level and at GCSE level. And we've taken those things and put the ideas into this PowerPoint so that you've got everything you require. All right, so I'm hoping that these questions will be answered. If they're not, we'll come back to how you can get your questions answered. So the nitty-gritty of this section is we've looked at assessors, and in a nutshell, there are different reports for different reasons. And hopefully this will give you an overview of what you may have seen, sourced, or wish to source and understand. So a screening test or report will provide a profile of strengths and weaknesses and will give an indication of whether or not the student has possible SPLD difficulties, plus study-related recommendations. This may be sufficient just for A-levels, all right, especially for students with no diagnosis so that they can access the school support, but it is not a formal diagnosis. Tina and I are seeing so many students who think they're dyslexic, and they have had maybe a 20-minute screener at primary and early secondary school, and maybe had extra time at GCSEs. Now, these screening tests are not valid diagnosis and won't be suitable at universities. You will not be able to apply for disabled students allowance funding or anything else, especially educational health and care plans as well. Screening is great because it gives you an idea of going forward, but it is not a diagnosis. Then we have exam reports. Now, there's lots of different names for this. You'll see this referred to as exam reports, Form 8s, access arrangements reports, exam arrangement reports, lots of different terminology. But ultimately, in short, the criterion for these reports are set by the Joint Council, the JCQ, all right, the exam boards, regarding applications for exam adjustments, which apply, and you have to apply using these reports. But also it affects the student if you're applying for DSA, because you want to have evidence. And we'll go on to discuss that a little bit more in a moment. So exam reports are really about extra time adjustments in A-levels only. The second slide here goes on to discuss diagnostic assessments for post-16s. Now, they're specifically written with higher education and adulthood in mind. However, I'm seeing more and more students who've not had adjustments at GCSEs, whose parents believe they might have SPLD. So they've spoken to the SENCO at the school, and the school has not assessed the student, or the school suggests that the basic exam arrangement report has not or would not identify scores that would warrant the school to apply for adjustments for the team. Now, this, however, is something that I'm seeing very bright and very intelligent SPLD students who are undiagnosed are finding, because they're finding the change of the learning model at A-level very, very different from GCSE. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But at A-levels, the student is expected to interpret, use deductive reasoning, for example, instead of just regurgitating the knowledge that they're taught at GCSEs. Very, very different. So all of a sudden, those who've managed and had really great strategies at GCSEs, they're struggling. So we've noted that it is the SENCO who applies for the exam adjustments at A-levels, and whether the school recommends that you source a diagnostic assessment for exam adjustments, or parents are taking this frustrating matters into their own hand, the school will have to, one, note that the assessor as approved by the centre, and that the SENCO will have to complete section 1s of the Form 8 reports. Now, I'm going into lots of technical points here, but essentially what you will have to do is, whether you have a diagnostic assessment, if you're going to university or going to work, or the student has never had exam arrangements at GCSE, you have got to speak to the SENCO and the school. It is imperative that the assessor and SENCO liaise, all right? And the reason why that's important is because the school will have to complete certain documentation according to the JCQ guidelines, all right, for inspection. So I want to talk to you about exam arrangements, because for A-levels, this is really important and it's time sensitive. So I've put in a little bit of information about this to give you some ideas, but I've also referenced the summer 2022 arrangements, which you can Google online. All right, they are available for you as parents or as educators to have a look at these. So A-level students, shall I move this off the screen so you can see it better? I think there's a way of, oops. Can everyone see the screen okay?
I was going to say, the screen looks fine, Angie.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, no worries. No worries. So this is students without a formal diagnosis for SPLD. And they've done their GCSEs, and what I've just mentioned, I've put some notes for you here. All right, it's the school's responsibility to apply for exam arrangements, but the school can register external partners or a private assessor if it is approved by the head of centre. All right, but you need to talk to the SENCO, because an exam report can be freestanding. You can just have the SENCO do an exam report, but you could have a diagnostic assessment done and have an extension of a Form 8 completed as well at the same time. But it is imperative that the school and the assessors are liaising and agree. So speak to the SENCO now. If you have not had adjustments for your child or your student who you're tutoring, etc., it is imperative that you speak to them now, because applications for exam adjustments on a Form 8 must be made approximately 3 months before the exams. For example, any exams that took place back in January, the deadline was in October 2021. And the deadlines for June 2022 exams will be at the end of this spring term. There are some leeways here though. So if you haven't got adjustments in place for your A-level student or child, now's the time to take on board what the previous slides have advised, all right? Go and speak to the SENCO and then have a look at a way forward. Either they will look at a Form 8 and exam adjustments, or they'll make recommendations of who to go to for a diagnostic assessment, and will liaise with the assessor for a Form 8, all right, to be made part of that. And then request the school to provide some study skills. We'll talk about study skills later on, but absolutely important to understand how study skills can help with the use of exam arrangements. If a student has exam arrangements and they don't have guidance on how to use them effectively, it's not going to help that student. It's no good just saying, oh, here's extra time. the student needs to know how to time manage, and that is a study skill. All right. I do have some cautionary notes. So the next few slides give you a couple of scenarios and asks you to look carefully at this. All right. So Form 8 reports can be done even without a diagnosis for SPLD at A-levels. But if, for your scenario 1, if a student with or without an SPLD had a GCSE exam adjustments and they change schools and start doing A-levels at a different school, they must take to the new school the old Form 8 or exam report documents from GCSEs with them. It's really important that this is given to the new school or college. All right, really important. The second cautionary note and scenario is if the student did not have GCSE adjustments and has no diagnosis, do look again at the previous slides and make sure you do agree with the SENCO prior to sourcing a full diagnostic assessment. It's really important. And these are the things that you need to consider and say to the SENCO if you don't have exam adjustments or a diagnosis yet. All right. A privately commissioned diagnostic assessment carried out without prior consultations with the school cannot be used for access arrangements, but will still be valid for university if it's written by an APC holder. And again, the qualifications about assessors, all the information you need are on the slides as well. All right. So what I've done on this slide here is I've given you an overview of what a good diagnostic assessment will include, because a post-16 diagnostic assessment has two main purposes. One, to access support at university or apprenticeships, and these reports are written with these in mind. And secondly, it's to access grant support and funding for going to university and study support, and we will concentrate and focus on that in section 5. All right, so this hopefully will give you an overview. This presentation doesn't discuss diagnostic assessments in details, but it gives you where to look and an idea of roughly what will be included. I will say at this point that assessment takes approximately 3 hours and a very detailed report will be written, which would include tailored recommendations. And at the end of this presentation, I have given you some more references and guides on where to source assessments, but Tina and I are on hand should you wish to ask for anything else or know anything else that we haven't covered in here. So I have also added tips for quality assurance. All right, there are some key points that you should be thinking about and also questions to ask yourselves. You can be the judge of who's going to assess something so important as your own child or yourself, you as an individual. Be confident in the individual that you're talking to. Are they passionate about the area? Do they know about the fields? And are they professional in what you are requesting and what you need? And is it being tailored to you or to your daughter or son? It's really important that you look. And good assessors are not in a rush to assess. It's not about rushing through. It's about making sure that a good quality report is considered, because it will be with you for the rest of your life. So make sure that you choose a good assessor, all right? And there's lots of information in the previous slides that are there to help you and guide you with that. I've also given you an idea of what assessors will use. So you've got a list of that. I've given you some tips on how to choose an assessor. If you choose an SPLD, what to consider, and if you choose an educational psychologist, what to think about, all right? So that slide is there to give you some reassurances of who to go to find a diagnostic assessment. And then I've put some final thoughts. As you can see, diagnostic assessments can cost anywhere from £350 to £1,000, depending on your region and the competitiveness of the assessors in the area. The NHS will not fund this, and assessments are sourced privately. All right. You can look at some grants that are available from some societies, but they are very, very few and far between. And unfortunately, I only know of one. If you are interested, do put in the chat and we'll email you the details, because it is not on this presentation. All right. But there are really, really good assessor guides and registers out there who are vetted, and that's the key. You want to find people who are registered and who have the professional indemnity and insurance, and I put down the informations for you there. That was a whistle stop first part. So questions, do you have any questions at this stage?
I can't see anything in the chat box at the moment, Angie, but I thought I'd just make one quick comment. Hold on, I'll put my video on. Just a very quick comment about going back to what Angie was saying about if you've got a child who's moving from one school to another school for sixth form. It's really, really useful to have the Form 8s, their exam arrangement paperwork from their first school, because actually, generally speaking, the arrangements do not carry over. In a few cases, or in some cases, what they're trying to promote is that schools and colleges work together so that they will carry over. But any organisation that's doing exam arrangements have to have the certificates of the original assessors, so it's quite a big deal. But the paperwork is just so useful in creating that picture of need, because if you've had a child who's been in a school from year 7 up to their GCSEs, they've got loads of history about how they normally work, what support gets put in place. When you're meeting a student for the first time, you're getting them there and you don't know very much about them, so it's really useful to have that paperwork with you. But many places they will not generally carry over, and so the assessment process starts again.
Thank you, Tina. Very good. Okay, a lot to process. I totally understand. And that's why you will be given the presentation post this discussion this evening and this presentation, because we do understand that there are some things that you are focusing in on, but later on might want to know. So at least then you can process it in your own time and review it as and when you need to. So moving on then, we've covered emotionally preparing the student. We've understood why, the tips. We've looked at the types of assessments and is it worth the sourcing, the costs, the implications, the assessors, all the important things around types of assessments. It's not just about what type of assessments there are. There are lots of other factors which you have slides to guide you and to give you some ideas to think about, all right? So let's then look at the key aspect, and we're going to slow down in this section here because I want to actually show you some strategies that might be helpful. But as I say, this is not a study skills session, but I want to give you an idea of how to do this, all right, and how to then empower your daughter, son, or student. So A-level study skills required for 16 to 18-year-olds preparing for HE. The first thing is that you need to work with students to know the curriculum being assessed. And that's the knowledge. Now, it's not just, oh, I'm doing A-level history, I'm doing A-level biology. It's about reviewing the marking criterion for the subject. It's about knowing what exam boards. It's about understanding, sorry, my PowerPoint there is missing a W, follow, exam following, to follow. So there's lots of things that needs to be considered, but I want to just put my camera on at this point. Because I want to show you maybe a visual aid. Oh, what a shame. I really wanted you to see me peeling an orange, but I think you'll get the gist. So the example I wanted to really show you was about peeling an orange, because we always start somewhere, and when we eat an orange, we peel it and we break it down into sections. And that's what I really wanted to highlight to you, that you can break things down for the student and use the imagery of peeling an orange. Where to start is you start peeling the skin. You've got this massive orange to get through. You first of all peel the skin. You peel away at it, and then you look at the segments of what is making up the orange, and then you attempt to eat it. I'm really sorry you can't see me peeling this lovely orange, but you get the gist. And this is what I'm trying to advocate here. Break down the curriculum. So here's how to do it. I'm using...
If you hold that orange up, we will be able to see it, because we can see your face.
Oh, can you? There you go. Look,
yeah, we can see it.
So there's my orange. And everything is going to come back to this image of orange. Okay. So you first of all start by peeling away and thinking about what it is in the A-levels that I need to do. And then you start segmenting and thinking about what is involved in making up that A-level curriculum. And we're going to now do that together. Hopefully you get my visual image. So the first thing I would say to you is find out what exam board the exam follows. E.g., is it Edexcel? Is it AQA, Pearson? You get the idea. OCR, all those sorts of exam boards. Your daughter or son will actually know, and they are downloadable. I'm going to use this evening A-level history. It's easily available online, and you can either even ask the school and download particularly the pre-released areas to focus on. Now, previously, in previous years, A-level and GCSEs, the topics being examined specifically were not made available. But this year, 2022, what the students will be assessed on is very, very clear. As you can see, this is 174 pages just on the sections, the segments of what will make up the A-level history exam. They will know, the student will be told and will be taught sections by sections, all right? And I'm going to use this particular example, the May to June 2022 syllabus and the advanced information, all right? Because I think it's really helpful to understand that the student will know everything they need to know, revise for the exam. Then you need to remember that there are lots of topics. So what I want to do is talk to you about the further steps that the student needs to be aware of. And that is, they need to be aware of the marking specifications. All right, what exactly do they need to make sure that their revision notes and their revision way of revising has to take on board? Exactly what is needed, and that is in the specs. It's all in the specifications. I am, however, going to use one particular example, and that is A-level history, society and culture in change, from 1917 to 1980. And this is from paper 1, option 1F, in search of the American dream, the USA. And I want to use this example all evening, so I will come back to this later on as well. All right. And then, so you found the specs, you found what they need to revise, what they have to learn in detail. And now you need to look at, using the diagnostic assessment, their strengths. It's really important because we speak always of the weakness of SPLD. Oh, they can't do this, or they're slower at this. But actually, the diagnostic assessment identifies not just weaknesses, but gives knowledge of what study skills will improve those areas. And that's the key. They can be developed with strategies. These weak areas can be improved with adjustments and self-development. So we need to get the student to look and self-reflect on their own interests, their knowledge, the skills that they have, tools, techniques that they already have, and then help them to apply that to A-levels. And I'm going to use, as I say, A-level history and give you this example. Show me a teenager who is not familiar with Instagram or TikTok. I dare you to. There isn't one out there. They all know how to use Instagram and TikTok. They understand branding, influencing, stalking, imaging. Instagram teaches it all. It's good or bad, and we could discuss that, I know, but I guarantee you a teen knows how to research and investigate everything of interest on these apps. They could find out who went where, with who, or even who's talking to who. Teenagers, particularly girls, can be excellent detectives. That is a strength and can be channeled. So if we're using A-level history as an exemplar, the paper specs highlights that A-level papers require evidence and facts, so require interpreting and understanding. So really, investigating and research is the key. It's the same skill that you use on Instagram for stalking, researching, browsing, same principle for researching. So by looking at what they do in things like social media, in terms of their hobbies, and then getting them to link and question how they would use maybe the search engines in Instagram or TikToks, etc. The same principle is to browse and understand and investigating women in the Great Depression, for example, which is part of the topics. So I've just given you one example of using what the student's own interests and skills is. It's really important that it is amalgamated into studying because it will help them with their motivation. The third area to think about then as well is some basic study skills. I've listed some, and you notice that I've highlighted a few: reading comprehension, planning and structuring. Everyone hears about all of these buzzwords, but they are very, very important at A-levels. So you might think that a student knows how to do this, but I will reiterate, make sure that they revisit these using their subject areas. And this one here, using planning, coursework notes and essays to create revision visual mind maps to find and remember. That's one I want to give you an example of here. So Tina, you're going to be looking at the chat box for me again, if I may. I want to ask the attendees a couple of questions. Please can I ask you one or two questions and to respond if you want to. It's entirely up to you. If I took you to the world's largest library in the world, the largest library is the Library of Congress in Washington, by the way, DC. It's a book lover's dream. How many books do you think there would be in that largest library in the world? Guesses, please, in the chat box. Anyone brave enough, Tina?
They're thinking at the moment. I'm going to go for several thousand.
Okay.
Oh, look, we got 1 million, 1.7 million. Oh, there's a lot of zeros on there. 10 million.
Okay.
Oh,
great guesses.
1, 2, 3. Hold on, I have to put commas in for my millions. So, yeah, 1 million from Bell House. So we're looking at millions, basically.
Okay.
I was very underestimated on a couple of thousand.
Okay, you'll be surprised then to know that there is 164 million
Wow.
items in that library. All right. And they are on 1,350 kilometers or 813 miles of bookshelves. All right. It's the world's largest library. Now, if I asked you to go into that library and I want you to find a book on butterflies, where would you look? Tell me where you would go first to look. Any ideas?
Oh, book on butterflies. Biology.
Okay. Anybody
Science,
got any comments?
We've got
in
science,
the chat box?
non-fiction. Oh, excellent. Felicity, librarian. Perfect answer. I'm guessing Felicity might be dyslexic because that's
Fabulous answer. I like it. You thought outside the library box. Okay, well, let me get to the point then. A library would possibly categorize that book for butterflies under animals. Then it might subcategorize it. Someone was saying biology or insects. And then maybe they might put it alphabetically. The point is, if you took that book out and you read it and you thought, oh, wow, this is a great book, and you remembered key things in it and then put it back on the shelf in the wrong place, how frustrating would it be in 3 months' time when you're going to a butterfly farm and you really wanted to take that book with you to, you know, because you're a butterfly enthusiast, and you wanted to remember bits from it, but you couldn't find that book? That would be so frustrating. Well, our students, the teens' brain and minds, is like a giant library. They actually have way more than the largest library in the world information in their heads. So what we must do to help recalling is to find a visual map and create a visual map so they can find and remember what they have to specifically learn. All right, so I'm going to briefly show you how to do a revision visual mind map using some of the things that we've talked about previously in the previous slides so that our students can find and remember. So bear with me. I'll just go to my next slide. So you recall we downloaded the specs and we looked at, in particular, paper 1, option 1F. By the way, I think there's 4 papers in this series, In Search of the American Dream. And I'm going to then go back to my orange imagery to break it down. All right, how to revise. I've got a step-by-step guide. I'll come to that in a moment because I will share that with you. But I have done for this particular spec and for whoever's going to be learning A2 history, I've looked at the content of just one area. Okay, so that would include changing position of women, 1917 to 1980, impact of the Roaring Twenties, Great Depression, New Deal on women, impact of the Second World War. You get the idea. There's lots of information there. Oops. So how to revise a step-by-step guide is exactly what we've just done. We've downloaded the paper, we've looked at the core topic, and now what we have to do is we now have to create a map in our head. And the way we do that, and the way students should be revising, is having a uniformed and regular pattern. Everybody remembers patterns. The brain loves patterns. So for revision mind maps, I would always stick to either 8 or 6 key areas. And in this one, which is our society and culture, we've got the contents. I've taken out 8 subheadings. All right, so I've broken the whole picture of our orange up into 8 segments. Making sense? 8 segments of orange. And all of that, impact on women in the Roaring Twenties, impact on women in the Great Depression, impact on women in the New Deal, Second World War, impact on and suburban life, emergence of women's liberations, women's liberation movements and its achievements, extent on women's advancement. I've created 8 subheadings. Now, what the student would need to do is then subsequently create almost mini essays on all the key points within that. So they need to say, the orange is now the impact on women in the Roaring Twenties. And each segment is an important point of revision. And each segment becomes a paragraph of information, which then creates a mini paragraph, a mini essay. And once all the information from their course, from what they've been researching, from what they know, their little pictures, their little drawings go down into these subheadings that they've created within each of these subheadings, they've got an essay. And then you can think of lots more questions. You can use past papers at this point to create further questions. Has my little essay on impact on women in the Roaring Twenties, has it covered everything that I think will come up in exams? If not, let me add the pros and cons. Let me look at the evidence. The student knows point, evidence, explain. And they could do that for every single point within each of these subheadings. That is what each of these segments of the paragraphs to create these mini essays are. And then actually what I've done here is I've actually given you a different overview of that step. So download the specs, identify the topics to be revised, create 6 to 8 subheadings within those topics. We've used women, remember, in the American Dream, and create paragraphs and mini headings for each of those, mini essays for each subheading, and then start boiling down those mini essays to bullet points, to keywords, those words that you'll remember. And then subsequently create 1 A4 page of a boiled down, I'm sorry, my picture and photography is rubbish, but you get the gist. I folded a piece of paper. So here's my piece of paper, A4. I folded it in half. I folded it in half again and again. And what that's allowed me to do when I open up my paper, which is what you're seeing on the screen, is 8 clear boxes, which are the key bullet points of what a boiled down essay will have. So they would have, for the first square, impact on women in the Roaring Twenties, all their points, all their evidence, which is based on their essay that they wrote. Then in the second box, impact on the Great Depression, you know, pictures, imageries that they can refer to. Number 3, the third box, women in the new era, all the points from the essay that they wrote in a simplistic fashion is put into that box. You get the idea. All right. And this is just about the US American Dream. I'm sorry that my photo is not as clear as I wanted it to be. It's not really my skill IT, but summarizing each mini paragraph down into keywords or points creates a visual mind map on 1 A4 piece of paper. And this is almost like their flashcards. This is the visual map of where they're going to find in their giant library of a head the information that they need to recall during the exams. I've just shown you very, very quickly. This session with a student would take me an hour, and I would literally do some with them. So that starts them off. So I'd probably do impact on women in the Roaring Twenties, show them a step. They'll come from a session with a checklist of how to do it again, and they just literally follow that on all the others. And then we'd start again on biology or chemistry, whatever it might be. You get the gist. So that was my example for creating mind mapping and looking at study skills and being aware of the specs and how to break things down and how to remember and focus on study skills generally for their specific needs. The fourth things that you do need to also consider quite seriously is to build critical thinking ability. Now, earlier on, I highlighted that A-levels are testing a different level of thinking ability, all right? It's really important that we define and understand that the learning models of A-levels are actually preparing them for university. They are not the same as GCSEs. So this is the reason why I needed you to have a look at what critical thinking is. I'm not going to advocate any particular method or individual or video, but I do think this is an area that you need to be familiar with and understand how to develop this area. It is an area that can be worked on. And so what I have done is I've just given like an activity, all right? Tina and I were looking at this yesterday and we liked some of it, we didn't like others of it, we wanted to simplify it, but actually what the principle of what I wanted to get across to you is literally in this slide. I was going to advocate that you look at and learn what critical thinking is. I've put 2 links there. They may not be your idea of they're very quick videos, but the article's very good. But you can do your own research, but ultimately learn what critical thinking is. And then ask your team, because what you will find is that critical thinking is linked to their ethos, their motivation, their desires, how they deductively reason through things. And what you need to do is try and channel that, because they do have those skills. We just need to channel it into a career. And I guarantee you, if you went to any job interview right now, there's always going to be that one question that's asked: where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? If your teen is not having an idea of where they might want to go, that's where you need to use critical thinking and motivational techniques to give them that drive. It is really important, because then what they've got is a timeline where they can start building and linking new learning to where they want to go. And that's just as important as learning A-levels. All right. So this is an activity that I think you can do together. And I've given you some tips on what to think about. All right. So I'm going to move on from that. And that's just the article. Again, I'm not endorsing any particular article. I'm not favoring one over the other, but I just think there is some very, very good articles out there. And the idea is, if you build critical thinking ability, it will help their writing. And that is what A-level are testing, particularly some subjects. All right. Now, if you find that I can only speak from law and from medicine, because those are the areas that I've worked within. So if you're wanting to look at career paths in medicine and law, this is essential, absolutely essential. All right, so those are the 2 things that I would say. And then going back to our example and then thinking about critical thinking, because this is about A-level history and we want to think about critical analysis and the way they write. So here are 8 subheadings, again, that we're revising within. And I'm just going to take one: impact on women in the Roaring Twenties. Well, they have to understand and define that. What does Roaring Twenties mean? How do we know that it was the Roaring Twenties? Explain that. Expand on how we knew. Provide relevant evidence. What's the evidence that roaring 20s? When I say roaring 20s, we all understand it, but that's an unwritten, unspoken knowledge. That's what your student or your daughter and child have to know, son and daughter rather, has to know. All right. Illustrations, highlighting specific problems, understanding how the roaring 20s came from, what it came from post-war, and why that impacted on the roaring 20s, and then subsequently the Great Depression, and how all of that had a big impact as well. All right. So it's all about linking things, looking at what they already know to new learning. And this is a really good way of helping critical thinking. All right. You can ask them to self-evaluate. So I've just put that in to help you. And again, remember our orange. Break it down. I've just taken one of those areas, impact on women in roaring 20s, and we've broken down different things. Does their little mini essay have all of these key points in? All right. So you've noticed that there are some very important skills that need to be developed. And I am always aware that finding a tutor might be a challenge because of availability, time, costs, etc. But I would always advocate finding a tutor and also getting the school involved. The schools do have very dedicated individuals that do after school classes, sessions, and the teachers who teach are extremely passionate in their fields. So they want their students to pass. And if a student is asking for, you know, extra help in some things, I think that you'll find that the tutors may really be open to some of those sorts of requests to help. All right, so do ask, but this slide gives you some ideas on where to find a tutor and some of the things to think about, you know, things like rapport. If the student doesn't get on with the tutor, they're not going to learn. All right. So, paused. Questions, if I may. Any questions for Tina in the box?
No questions in the box at the moment. Just a note on tutors, though, I suppose. It's always worthwhile finding out who someone else is using or get a recommendation and get in there early. You know, if you already know what subjects your child wants to study at A-level, start looking whilst they're in GCSEs, because I certainly know lots of tutors who've got 2-year waiting lists, and I when I take students on, I have them, you know, 1 or 2 years in advance. So I think if you know if they know what they want to do at by the time they're doing their GCSEs or just before, start looking for that A-level tutor early, because you can take the place. If they're holding it for you, can take it. If they've changed their mind, you don't have to hold on to it. Most, well, I don't know, I say most tutors don't take a deposit, but you know, a lot of tutors don't take deposits, so it might be worth doing that.
Indeed, I totally agree. The other thing that I would say is have a look at your own friends and family as well. Have a look at how they may not be tutors, but they could be very, very good mentors. So a chat with a friend of a friend or your close friend about their employment or their school life or how they learnt or their methods of revising is really as important, because it shows that different people learn in different ways. This is just one option. This is really good at making patterns, and dyslexic learners and any other learners prefer patterns and logic. And this actually working backwards helps them, because they just have to remember a visual image and they can find the information. But it may not work for every student. So find out and use mentors as well. You know, friends and family that could chat to the students and give them, you know, informal advice. Okay, so moving on, if there's no further questions, Tina.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, visual image of where we're at. we've rushed through the first 3 areas. We've focused on a couple of examples, but you can see this is not a study skills session. It's a foundation session of where to start, what to do, what to think about, how to prep the foundations before you start looking at sourcing tutors, etc., etc. So this section, as I say, the slides that are coming up within this section, I've gone into a bit of detail, but I'm not going to focus on them heavily because obviously I want to get to the DSA section of this talk. But I want to give you a little analogy again. As you can see, I like my little imageries and I like my little stories. I want to tell you a bit about this. I know how to drive. Well, I've been driving for 32 years. But if you ask me to drive on a Formula One racing track, I wouldn't know what to do, but I know how to drive. And I think that this analogy is a really good one to explain to students. They may know or feel that they may know how to study, but actually driving on a Formula One track is as different as studying for A-levels. It's very, very different to GCSEs. They may know some aspects of studying, like I know about driving, but it's not the same principle. So I'm hoping that you see the link of my Formula One because it was the start of that new season this weekend. So moving on. I've put some essential things to note, particularly about self-motivation, about emotional intelligence and resilience skills. All right, it's really important. I will go into detail about those. My primary role is currently consulting at a law school, and surprisingly, there are a very different level of neurodiverse students with different levels of emotional intelligence and resilience. And part of the reason why I want to support A-level students again is I can see that that is the pivotal age to develop this. So right now and at GCSEs is the time to develop these skills, because otherwise at postgraduate level, so when students are doing their bar training course or their legal practitioners course, etc., they do struggle if they don't have these skills. So this is the reason why I'm saying it's essential at this stage. All right. I've also put in some pointers to think about, all right, because another aspect is to introduce back to you as parents and educators. I'm not a counsellor, but I want, this area touches specifically on counselling, self-awareness and parenting skills. So I'm only going to give you a basic guidance of where to go and simple strategies, but I have given you some very detailed information about resources and where to research, because this is an important aspect. And you notice a lot of things are to give you pointers on what to look for. All right. It is a responsible, and we've got to consider building resilient students. Otherwise, they just really flounder at university or in the workplace, because ultimately the workplace is the university of life. All right. So ultimately, wherever our students go or our children or teens go on to, they need to have that resilient and not the negative perceptions that are associated with anxiety and fear and ability and failures. So it's all about positive language. All right. So I'm not going to give you a counselling session, but I'm going to give you some really key areas. And here are the key areas. I'd like you to think about preparing students for additional challenges they face mentally and emotionally. It's about empowerment, looking and using visualization skills, looking at what the difference is between emotional intelligence and resilience, because they're totally different things, communications, language, and about nurturing curiosity. We talked about earlier identifying students' skills, their interests, Instagram, etc., and actually making sure that they use those skills in their learning careers and pathways. All right. So each of these subsequent slides deals with how to do that. So you've got the pointer, for example, visualization to improve motivation, some of the things that why they need that and why it's useful. And I've given you some tips on how to do that. All right. As the name suggests, emotional intelligence activities and exercises are actually attempts, I suppose, to build and develop and maintain the student's emotional intelligence, often called EI. All right. Teaching emotional intelligence could help students handle situations effectively. They'll be able to identify, communicate their feelings to other people, and could help them read situations and relationships. I do understand that SPLD comes with coexisting conditions, which may impact on this and may be tougher for some, but it's not impossible to help improve those areas. We could also help them regulate their emotions and help them respond appropriately to others. This is not just about students' well-being, this is about changing their own attitudes to anxiety and low confidence, which actually sometimes is associated with SPLD. All right. So look at resilience as an ability to bounce back. All right. Again and again, with every obstacles we face, it's important that resilience is built. Not only is it important in a school setting, it's a parenting life skill and we impart to our children. So as a parent, I'm saying that for well-being, we need to work on that. And parents must reevaluate their own emotional resilience and intelligence and discuss this with their own students or children. I'm not a counsellor, as I say, or a life coach, but there are some ideas here for you. And it's really important not to miss this out at all. So I've given you some activities and some places what to think about, what to talk about, how to work on these in the home, some ideas for you really to think about. All right. I've also looked at communication, verbalization, language, and positive affirmation, giving you some tips as well to go there. Encourage responsibility for learning and discussion about what they want to do. All right, that's really important as well. And then we talked about the curiosity, the nurturing a desire for learning. So we talked about that earlier on with the Instagram and TikTok example about how researching and linking that to their choice of topics. Okay, so that was indeed a whistle-stop tour of supporting emotional and motivational needs. You've got all the information on those slides. Do go back, do revisit those, and do take them as part of your home and up parenting aspects as well. So at this point, is there any questions that you specifically wanted to ask on that section? Any questions? Tina?
Not in the box. Not in the box at the moment.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So let's move on to DSA. So our student is revising for A-levels. They're preparing for A-levels. We thought about what's going to happen next in their next step, whether they're going into university, whether they're going to college, whether they're going into apprenticeships. The next step is about transition. But here, I'm going to focus on DSA grant funding and university transition. And again, the informations are all in the slides, but I'm going to just go through them systematically with you. You've got everything you need. And at the end of this presentation, I'll talk to you about how you can get further and more in details. So first off, what is DSA? Well, for me, I think it's a negative connotation. The phrase disabled students allowance is very negative. So it puts a lot of students off from applying. But actually, students with diabetes can apply for this. Medical conditions that we think is not considered disabled under normality, but it's covered under the Equality Act. So I would encourage every student to apply for this grant funding, and that's the key. It's funding for specific learning difficulties, but if you have clinical, psychological, or medical coexisting diagnoses alongside, you can apply as one application. All right, so if you've got Asperger's syndromes with dyspraxia, or ADHD and dyslexia, or mental health diagnosis with dyslexia, just diabetes and dyslexia, you get it, you get the gist, you can apply. It's a grant for extra financial help for students with medical, clinical, psychological, physical, or specific learning difficulties. Now, whatever the student is awarded, they get to keep. And I'll talk to you about what is part of that award. And it's not based on household income. So if you have a diagnosis, and thus the reason why we spoke about diagnostic assessments, because exam reports will not be valid on this, and we'll talk about that a bit more, you can apply for this, and it's not based on your household income, and it's not even based on whether or not you are applying for student loans. If you decide to self-fund the university course or the college course, you still can apply for this if it's a higher education institution. All right, so it's a college who's delivering foundation or degree courses, all right, post A-level courses, post level 3 courses. All right. So the key, because SPLD, study skills, critical thinking and strategies to manage at university are taught and improvable skills, one of the things that DSA does is they ask you to provide a dyslexia assessment which has that key aspects on where to work on, all right? And those provisions will help develop autonomous skills in your team. All right. So overview of the benefits. What is it that DSA gives you? The award, if the student gets given parts, will fall into different categories. The first is equipment, hardware. So hardware could be new laptops, dictaphones, printers. It's all individually assessed. All right. It doesn't have to be repaid, and the provisions are there to help the student study at university. So when the student is being looked at what difficulties they have, it will be looked from a hardware perspective, a specialist software perspective, so such as text help read and write. So if a student has speed of reading issues, this is a perfect program because it reads everything at a set pace and the student doesn't have to decode at all. So they can concentrate on the comprehension of what's being read to them. So software is absolutely brilliant. I've got loads of alternative tips and free tips and apps, but this is not a study skills session. So I would always say talk to Bell House if you want tips on revision strategies for A-levels, etc., etc. All right. DSA also provides specialist one-to-one study skills mentoring to help anxiety, exam preps, because again, studying at university level is slightly different, help to develop strategies to improve weak study-related issues that are mentioned in the diagnostic report, which are all teachable skills. And DSA also provides other costs of studying, things like photocopying, etc. All of that is covered. The more the student accesses, the better. So application forms and how do you apply? So what I've done on this slide is I've given you the link to where to find the forms and download them. And I've told you the timelines. So right now I am supporting students in March 2022 for those who are going to be starting university in September 2022. So you can see straight away, there's a lot of time prior to entry that you have to start thinking. So I've given you some ideas that if you're starting to think about university, your daughter or son is in A2 year, they need to apply now for university, via DSA rather. And if they're going in September 2023, entry to university, you need a 2023-2024 form, which will be available in March next year. All right. Ultimately, March is your starting point, but there will be some things I'll talk to you about in a moment because I have got a timeline for you. The full process can take 14 to 23 weeks to apply for DSA and must be submitted with a post-16 DSA diagnostic assessment report, along with any other medical evidence that you have or clinical diagnoses that you might have. This is the website that I have put the link on, and it gives you the overview, what's available, of legibility, but I would say focus on 4, 5 and 6. All right, lots of very, very useful information on that website. So if you're applying for student finance, i.e. the tuition fee loans and a maintenance loan, then you must do this before you apply for DSA. You'll need to review the following websites. So I put that there, particularly the sections I showed you. And if you don't have a DSA assessment report, you need to source one, but make sure that the holder is a practicing certificate holder. All right. DSA, student finance or student loan company will only accept specifically written reports by current APC holders. All right. So it's really important. So back when we talked about assessments, I put in a slide about quality assurance and tips to remember. That is one of the tips. All right. So we need to look at the timeline. So I thought it would be useful to give you a couple of slides about when to start doing things. All right. In January to April, source a full diagnostic assessment report that is post-16 by a qualified assessor. That is the January and April before your child goes to university in the September and October. All right. In the February, you apply for the student finance loans if you're going to go for loans and maintenance fees, ready for when they start in the September and October period. Then in March and April, contact your prospective university or the university of choice. It doesn't matter if you've got 2 or 3 university choices on the UCAS, all right? It doesn't matter which one. I would build a rapport with the one that you favour the most, because it is absolutely imperative that you register with them for adjustments and exam arrangements by submitting the full diagnostic report and medical evidence, but they can help you apply for DSA. There is a section in DSA which they have to endorse, and a lot of universities now have a check and send service. So what you do is like your passport form when you go into the post office. They have a look, they check everything, they make sure your photograph's fine. Well, that's the same with the form. It looks really complex, but it's actually a tick box. And you do have to fill it in a certain way, which isn't always user-friendly. So the disability advisor at your prospective university, your child's prospective university, can help you with that. They can ask for DSA forms, ask them to give you the forms, ask them to give you the notes on how to fill in, ask them to help you. They will do it. That's what they're there for. That's what disabilities advisors' jobs are. All right. Then in April to June, once Student Finance approves the DSA application, which has been endorsed by the prospective university, if you send off your DSA form on your own, it takes longer. If you go via the university, it's much quicker. All right. Once the application has been approved, Student Finance will advise you on how to book something that is called a study needs assessment. All right. And basically, that is someone who looks at the course, they talk to the university, they look at the specs. So if you're already in contact with the disability advisor at your prospective university, you can ask for these things and ask for guidance pre-attending the needs assessment. All right. They can tell you all about the specifications. A media course is totally different from a medicine course. A law course is totally different from an English language course, all right? And the disability advisor can help you and guide you, all right? I'm going to give you contacts at the ends for alternative guidance and arrangements, all right? But it is really worth you knowing that the disability advisor at the prospective university has all the answers, so use them, all right? In May to July, book your online study needs assessment or face-to-face and await the confirmation of approval letter, and that is called a DSA2 letter, all right? In July to September, source the information from the Study Needs Assessment Centre or prospective university resourcing awards, equipment, training or upgrading. It's really important here to mention that the Study Needs Assessment Centre or the prospective university have guides on how to upgrade, all the tips on awards, equipment, training. If you speak to the disability advisor about assistive technology, the supply, the delivery, setting up specialist equipment, for example, a computer, the disability related software or ergonomic furniture that you might need, you can also talk to them about assistive technology items from different approved catalogues. There's all sorts of things that you could do, but one of the things that I think is really, really important to note is this. This is an iPhone 6. Can everyone see that? Okay. My iPhone 6 drives me insane because it's running out of memory. It is a 32 in hindsight. I should have got 64 memory gig because I download lots of apps. And that's the sort of thing you need to think about. The equipment and the course. Are the memory, are the specs appropriate? And this is what the disability advisor can advise you on, all right? Or you could speak to your A-level tutor who you source to support your son or daughter, because they too will know about DSA. If they don't, make sure you speak to the prospective university all about it. All right. I'm showing you my iPhone because I think it's a really good visual aid. An iPhone 6 compared to an iPhone 12 is totally different. And the Student Finance are only obliged to provide you with the basic package. You can upgrade, you can change things, you can have different training, and you can have more training if you want. You just need to liaise with the disability advisor because they are the key to having things changed or upgraded for you. All right. If you do it on your own, it can be time consuming. All right. And then finally, September and October, the courses start. Oops. So what I've done on my last couple of slides, I'm sorry, I've slightly gone over, people are yakking away. I've put on these slides our contact details and further information of who you could call for advice and guidance. And a round of applause to you all for actually sitting through this presentation. So thank you very much. Any questions or feedback? I'm sorry that time is not allowed for an in-depth discussion, but if anyone has any questions that have not been answered tonight, if you email me immediately after this talk up until midnight tonight, I will make sure I answer all emails and get a response to you within 5 working days. In addition, I'm personally asking for constructive feedback. You can send this to me at any point. When we go through our talks or workshops or discussions, we all go with expectations, and you may have come expecting something that has not been covered or something different. I like to adapt things accordingly. So I would really value any pointers, constructive criticisms about how you would tailor this. It would be greatly appreciated. No comment is invaluable, so I would value everything, and I will adapt and improve for the next cohort of listeners. So I thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's get that.
Well, Angie, I don't know whether we've got time for questions really, but I just found that so incredibly useful. I wish that I had heard you speak while my son was the right age, because I can see it's really complicated, and going to the right person at the right time to actually get things to work and happen, makes all the difference. So really, really clear and interesting. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. If anyone doesn't have any further questions, I'm going to stay online for a little bit. If anyone wants to loiter, please feel free.
You're getting lots of thank you messages.
Oh, thank you,
Angie.
Sorry, I can't see the chat, but oh, here we go.
Do you know, I think it is worth saying one of the things that you were speaking about there, Angie, is how you can get an upgrade. And I went through this 2 years ago with my son, and we did indeed upgrade his computer. They tend to have a bog standard £300 Acer. My son's doing film production. He needed a high spec computer. So I just paid the additional. I went to the uni. I found out what computer would be ideal for his course. I let the company know who was dealing with all the DSA stuff, and they went out looking for it, and they just told me how much I had to stump up, which was quite a lot. But I told them what we were looking for spec wise, and they found stuff. So
and did you know some universities also have hardship funds that will pay for some of that? So that's why I advocate always speak to the disability advisor. They know where to help you, not only just to upgrade or specs, but also funding.
Oh, here we go. We've got a question here. Worried about timescales for September 22. What happens if you can't get in a place straight away?
Okay, so you're talking about university now, Ruth? A place at university, a place for assessments, a place.
I think that's a university
Angie,
place.
Sorry, yes, my daughter's hoping to start university in September, but I think, I don't know whether it's similar for other people, but we had she had a full diagnostic assessment when she was in primary school, and obviously has had access arrangements at GCSE and hopefully at A-level as well. But now I'm wondering, we haven't got an assessment for post-16, and you're sort of saying we need to get that done, but I know that people are it's very difficult to get an assessment. So even if we were able to get one over the summer, what would we do?
You can still apply, Ruth. The timelines are there as guidance, so that you don't rush and trip over yourself. And if you want things done in a nice, slow, easy, gentle format, those are the timelines to go with. But they're not hard and fast rules. They're just there to guide you. You're absolutely correct, though. Focus on sourcing a diagnostic assessment first. So I would definitely look at the slides that advocate PATOS or BDA, where you can find assessors in your area. And then do look at the slides again about quality assurance, what you would like. And you are the customer. So highlight what your expectations are from a diagnostic assessment and why you would like it, and what you want them to, please give my daughter some feedback on how she can improve, because she's going into, what does she want to study, Ruth?
International development.
Yeah, so highlight that those are her key interests and that's what she wants to do. She's got a career path already forged a little bit. It may change, but ultimately she's got an idea of ways forward. And the assessor then will write the report. Once you've got that report, then you can apply. All right. I noticed that DSA specifically are improving their systems. My PowerPoint slides was based on a very old timeline, which they've just released yesterday, that they're much quicker at turning around. So whereas I've given you an idea, it takes months for this and months for that, and each step takes a month or two, it might be a bit quicker. So even if you put in your diagnostic assessment in July,
right,
you may have time. You may have time. So to have things in place before she starts, but it's not the end of the world. If she doesn't have it immediately she starts, it would just make her feel more confident that she's got everything ready. It's like going to an event and you haven't got everything ready, but it will give her confidence if it's in place. If it's not, she just, as long as she's liaising with the disability department, she's getting input from them, she's getting adjustments and advice going forward, that will empower her, so she won't be too worried. She'll also be able to access the university's interim supports while she waits for other things.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I don't want to take up too much time. Can I just ask, did I understand it correctly that you can't get extra time at university without the diagnostic assessment? Is that right?
Well, I'm going to say this with there's no hard and fast rules. Some universities will put a temporary agreement in place and ask the student to source a diagnostic assessment, and they may partially fund the new diagnostic assessment. It would be unfair to say to you, don't have an assessment before you go to university, because you can't guarantee that the university will accept the Form 8 or the exam arrangement or the previous old diagnostic assessment. How old was she when she had that diagnostic assessment, out of interest?
She was in year 3.
Okay, so that is very old. Because some old diagnostic assessments, if the assessor was an APC back then, are being accepted, so she may not have to have a postgraduate, post-16 rather, diagnostic assessment. And this is the reason why I speak to an assessor, talk to them about your situation, talk to them about the university, and ask them, because some universities may accept the exam report. You don't know until you talk to them, but they will then only do a temporary adjustment for her on the basis that she has an old report and they want an updated report. I'm only speaking from Russell Group universities and law schools. They will ask for a full post-16 diagnostic assessment.
Yeah, I think it would be really great to get this posted out to sort of sixth forms in the area, because parents aren't being given this advice at all. And I think, well, I'm informed, I'm actually in the field and I don't know. So I can imagine so many parents and carers, in a really difficult position that then don't know what to support this. So I think, it would be great to get this sent to
absolutely, and that's
schools.
the reason why Bell House asked me to do something on A-levels in particular. I think they're recognizing a lot of parents like yourself may know some aspects but are not fully informed about all the fine details. And that's why I gave you scenarios, because they do change. There's no set rule on some things. There are some changes on depending on the university, depending on the schools, lots of different things. But you do need to take an individual case by case and talk to the Senko, talk to your disability prospective university is what I would say now.
Yeah, can I just echo something Angie just said, actually? Very often, if you talk to the university that you're applying to, they very often have a list of assessors that regularly submit assessments for their students. Because many moons ago, when I used to do the assessments, I worked with Greenwich Uni, and I was just one of their, they had about a dozen assessors that they used quite regularly, and they would fund more in the first year, a little bit less in the second year, and less still in the third year, towards that diagnostic assessment, so that a student could access DSA funding. So it's definitely worth contacting the uni that you have in mind.
And some universities, like mine currently, funds it all. However, it's not brilliant not to have the funding and the support in place beforehand. So it's down to you how you want to look at the options available to you. But the first port of call is to speak to your disability advisor at the university your daughter wants to go to.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, time flies
Angie,
when you're having fun.
Can I just say one other very quick thing? Sorry, just again from a personal experience, when the needs assessor phones up, I made sure I was in the background. So it was done because of COVID, it was done over the phone, but I made sure I was in the background just so that I knew they were taking into consideration all the strengths and weaknesses of my son, and that, you know, just to like discussion really, just to make sure that, yeah, I think that was what I was trying to say. I'm getting confused with my words, but yeah, just so that I knew they knew him, so that they would offer him what he needed. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Well done, Tina. Thank you very much all. Have a nice evening, because time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for your time. Tina, I'll call you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Have a nice evening, all.
Thank you, Angie. That was fantastic.
Lots of information, but yeah, things that people do need to know.
Oh, hey, Linda.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was really impressive and really informative. Hi, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
You're
okay.
welcome.
Have a good evening. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
I think that's Linda's husband.
Yes, I think that's right, isn't it? Yeah, no, brilliant. Angie, did we go over the time that you had arranged?
Just by 10 minutes, that's fine.
Yeah, you're probably exhausted.
Oh, I'm running on adrenaline. I will reward myself with a large glass of wine shortly.
Oh, now I'm going to have a glass of wine, Angie. You shouldn't have said that. Suzanne, I hope we're having wine on Friday.
Well, do you know, Angie, we're going to this vet show, and then afterwards we're going on for drinks, apparently. That seems to be the most important part of the day.
How utterly decadent of you. Wonderful. Well, have fun, won't you?
Will do.
If you want to go, Angie, do, because you know we're going to make our arrangements for Friday.
You do that.
So,
lovely speaking to you, Tina Hunter. As always, I'm always grateful as you as my wingman.
Excellent. I'll catch up with you soon.
All right then, text me later. Bye.
Yeah. See you, Angie. Bye. There we go.
All right. So Tina, what time are you thinking?
Okay, let me go back to my TFL. I'm thinking I don't really want to be on a train before 9:30. I fancy,
No,
you know.
Definitely not.
And it's a long day, isn't it? So hold on, I don't want the 9:20 journey. I can get a 9:36, and that 9:36 is only takes 15 minutes. 9:36, 9:46. I can get to London Bridge by 10ish.
10, yeah. Okay, so London Bridge, 10 o'clock. That, I think that sounds,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Are you coming in? Are you going to be? Are you coming from Dulwich?
I'm going to be coming from Forest Hill.
Oh, okay. So
so that goes to London Bridge.
Okay, so I'll meet you. So I'm going to stay. So shall I meet you? You know, there's a Leon in London Bridge.
A Leon?
Leon. Okay, Oliver Bonas. I'm just trying to think of the shops.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Okay, you know, as you come down, when you come off the platform, you'll come down the escalator.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go through the turnstiles. For the turnstiles, if you go through the turnstiles, there's the tunnel that will take you to the underground station.
Yeah, yeah.
At the entrance to the tunnel, I think there's like a Pret-a-Manger on the right-hand side or nearby. I can't remember the two shops, like Accessorize or something. I'll meet you somewhere. Have you got my mobile?
I don't think, I'm not sure. Have I? I don't think I have.
I'm sure we must be on WhatsApp somewhere.
We probably aren't actually.
Okay. Do you want my, or I can take your number or you can take mine, whichever. I'll take yours. You shall be Suzanne Bellhouse.
Suzanne
Bellhouse. Surname.
And my number,
yeah,
Suzanne at Bellhouse, is 077
yeah
19
yeah
698
yeah
382.
Right, okay. I'll just send you a quick text.
Something now.
Yeah. Test from Tina.
Right, are you doing it as a?
I've sent it as a text.
Yeah, I've got it. All right.
Hey.
Okay, so when I'm out and about, I don't have internet, but I can do that. I can do texting.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sure you're on WhatsApp, but then WhatsApp wouldn't work for me. So.
I use this on WhatsApp. Text message is definitely the way forward for me because I don't do, I mean, I find I don't get notifications on WhatsApp, so I don't do that. But yeah, okay. I'll text as I arrive, and then I may be bringing, so I've got a colleague that I work with, Carol, and I did mention her to Fabienne because I don't know if they're still looking for a Bell House manager.
Yes.
But Carol, I'd say, you know, when you have this epiphany, so she's about my age. She runs our LRC, like our Learning Resource Centre. She's totally up on all the technology that comes in and procedure. She organises a small team. I think she would be really good. So I've mentioned her I mean, she would be going to the vet show anyway, because that's what she does as part of her role. But so she may or may not come. But just so you know, I did send an email to Fabienne about her. So I'd be kind of interested to get your feedback as well. But
would she be able to be? Where does she live, Tina? Does she live in Orpington? I was just thinking, would she be able to get to Bell House? That's the thing, isn't it?
Yes, it's easy. Same as me. We just get the train. It's on the Victoria line, so it's very easy. I mean, she has to go from Orpington to our Bromley campus, which she drives. But you know, it's not that hard to get to Bell House from Orpington. It's what, 20 minutes on the train?
Because you know, because obviously I think they're looking for somebody who, you know, who can be at Bell House every day of the week.
Yeah, you know. And she's at the moment she's every day of the week at the college. But you know, it's just in the back of, you know, when you see someone you think, okay, I know that the one that Fabienne found, it didn't turn out too good.
Yeah.
But Carol is a really amazing woman. She's very calm, she's really organized, and she's very capable. She's really up on stuff. I mean, she teaches me stuff. She comes in, she's the one who taught me Office Lens. She's taught me all the software tech. So, you know, to work around Facebook is nothing for her. You know, she's really, really capable. But anyway, just so you know, that's our little secret.
Do you think she, well, anyway, I guess what's going to happen is they're going to re-advertise it, which they haven't done
Yes,
yet.
because I know there's nothing up there at the moment, but and I think Fabienne's just getting over an operation, so she's probably you know, got her mind on other things at the moment. But anyway, she may join us. Whoever
that would
knows.
be interesting. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
All
no,
right, then.
it would be really interesting. Okay, I will see you on Friday, 10 o'clock, somewhere by the tunnel that takes us to the underground.
Perfect.
I'll text you when I get there.
All right.
See you
Yeah.
soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.